At 7:30 inches the morning, on the 19th of November, 1961, a 23-year-old man, stripped to his underwear, tied 2 empty gasoline cans to his belt, and slid into the Arafura Sea 10 miles off the coast of Dutch New Guinea. He turned to the man clinging to the overturned hull beside him and said 5 words, "I think I can make it." He began to swim. He was never seen again. He was the son of the governor of New York. He was the great-grandson of the world's first billionaire. He was the heir, alongside 5 cousins, to a fortune so large that the United States Senate had once held hearings on whether his family controlled the American economy. How does the wealthiest young man in America vanish without a body, without a witness, and without a single confirmed trace? And why did his own father, a sitting governor with the resources of an entire state, abandon the search after only 10 days? His name was Michael Clark Rockefeller. He was 23 years old. He had graduated from Harvard the previous year, cum laude in history and economics. He had inherited, on his 21st birthday, a trust valued in 1961 at approximately $25 million, roughly $260 million in today's money. And he was, on the morning he entered the water, in possession of a secret his family would spend the next 63 years denying. In the next 40 minutes, you will learn 3 things the Rockefeller family has spent 6 decades burying. The contents of a 1,962 Dutch government cable that the Nelson Rockefeller administration personally requested be destroyed. The name of a 48-year-old Dutch missionary who, in November 1968, walked out of an Asmat village holding 3 human skulls. And the single sentence an Asmat elder said to investigative journalist Carl Hoffman in 2012, 51 years after the disappearance, in a longhouse on the Uta River. This is not a story about a missing rich kid. It is a story about what happens when an empire built on order collides with a coastline where order does not exist. Hold one image in your mind. 2 empty gasoline cans, tied with rope, bobbing on the surface of a brown sea. Remember them, we will return to them. In July of 1855, a 16-year-old boy named John Davison Rockefeller walked into a produce commission house in Cleveland, Ohio, and asked for a job. He had no diploma. He had no letters of reference. He had memorized the address of every commission merchant in the city from a directory at the public library. He had walked to each one of them, on foot, for 6 weeks. The 42nd one, Hewitt and Tuttle, on the corner of River Street and Superior, hired him as an assistant bookkeeper for 50 cents a day. He did not take a single day off, including Sundays, for the next 38 months. His ledgers from those first 3 years survive at the Rockefeller Archive Center in Sleepy Hollow, New York. They are written in handwriting so small that a modern reader requires a magnifying glass. Every entry is double-checked, every sum is balanced to the cent. In one ledger, dated September 1856, he records the purchase of a 3-cent pencil and notes in the margin, "Examine necessity." He was 17. By 20, he had opened his own commission firm. By 24, he had pivoted into oil, refining the riskiest, dirtiest, most volatile business in the post-Civil War American economy. By 31, on the 10th of January 1870, he incorporated the Standard Oil Company of Ohio with $1 million in capital. By 42, Standard Oil controlled 90% of American oil refining. By the time the Supreme Court ordered Standard Oil's dissolution under the Sherman Antitrust Act on the 15th of May, 1911, exactly the same case that broke up Buck Duke's American Tobacco, John D. Rockefeller had become, by Ron Chernow's accounting in Titan negative 1998, the wealthiest individual in human history. His personal fortune at his death in 1937 was approximately $1.5 billion, adjusted to $2,024. That is roughly $32 billion as a percentage of contemporary U.S. GDP. It remains to this day a larger fortune than Bezos, Musk, or Gates have ever held. But the moment that defines John D. Rockefeller's psychology is not the rise. It is a quiet evening in 1879, in his office at 26 Broadway in Manhattan. His secretary, William Cooper, asks him whether he has any concerns about an upcoming Senate hearing. Rockefeller does not look up from his ledger. He answers, in a single sentence Cooper records in his own diary the same night, "The man who fears nothing fears in the end only himself." 3 generations later, his great-grandson Michael will inherit the second half of that sentence. Not the first. By 1937, when John D. Rockefeller Sr. died at the age of 97 at his estate in Ormond Beach, Florida, the family had already begun the second American transformation that defines its history. They had stopped being industrialists. They had become philanthropists, statesmen, and patrons of art. The architect of that pivot was John D. Rockefeller Jr., the founder's only son. Born in 1874, he inherited approximately $460 million and spent the next 50 years giving it away with the same precision his father had used to acquire it. He funded the restoration of colonial Williamsburg. He financed the United Nations headquarters site in Manhattan. He built Rockefeller Center between 1,930 and 1,939 inches, the depths of the Great Depression. He founded the Museum of Modern Art with his wife Abby Aldrich. He gave away in his lifetime the equivalent of approximately $12 billion. He raised 6 children. The third son was named Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller, born the 8th of July 1908, named after his maternal grandfather, the Senate Majority Leader Nelson W. Aldrich. Nelson was the family's political animal. He was charming, athletic, dyslexic, ferociously ambitious, and by the assessment of every biographer who has studied him, incapable of being alone in a room for more than 9 minutes. He served as coordinator of inter-American affairs under Roosevelt. He served as Assistant Secretary of State under Truman. He served as Undersecretary of Health, Education, and Welfare under Eisenhower. On the 4th of November, 1958, he was elected the 49th governor of the state of New York. He would hold that office for 15 years, win re-election 3 times, and step down only in 1973 to begin, almost immediately, his run for the vice presidency he would assume under Gerald Ford in December 1974. Nelson had 5 children with his first wife, Mary Todd Hunter Clark. The fourth was a son. He arrived on the 18th of May 1938. Nelson named him Michael, after no one a name chosen, by Mary's later account, because it carried no prior weight in either family. The boy was, from his first hour, intended to be free of inheritance pressure. He was raised, paradoxically, inside the densest concentration of inheritance pressure in American history. The Rockefeller estate at Pocantico Hills in Westchester County, New York, where Michael grew up, encompassed 3,400 acres, 75 buildings, 8 private golf holes, and a private fleet of vehicles maintained by a staff of more than 200. The dining room at Kykwit, the main residence, sat 32. Michael ate dinner there, beginning at age 6, in coat and tie. Every Sunday his father was in residence. He was, by every account that survives, a quiet child. By the time Michael Rockefeller arrived at Harvard College in September 1956, the family stood at a height no other American dynasty has ever matched. His father was about to be elected governor of New York. His uncle David ran the Chase Manhattan Bank. His uncle John D. III ran the Rockefeller Foundation. His uncle Laurence ran the family's venture capital portfolio. His uncle Winthrop would, in 1966, be elected governor of Arkansas, making Nelson and Winthrop the only pair of brothers in American history to simultaneously hold governorships of separate states. Michael graduated from Harvard cum laude on the 16th of June 1960. He had majored in history and economics. His senior thesis, 248 pages on the comparative economic policies of post-colonial African states, earned him an offer of admission to the Harvard Graduate School of Arts and Sciences for the following autumn. He turned the offer down. In the summer of 1960, Michael told his father that he wanted, before settling into the family's expected trajectory of business and public service, to do something on his own. Something the Rockefeller name had never been attached to. He wanted to make a documentary film. He wanted to go somewhere remote. He wanted to live, for a year, beyond the reach of his last name. A Harvard classmate of his, the anthropologist and filmmaker Robert Gardner, was assembling an expedition to the highlands of Dutch New Guinea to film a Dani tribal war. Gardner needed a sound recordist. Michael volunteered. His father consented. The expedition departed New York on the 22nd of March 1961. Before he left, Michael spent a single afternoon in his Uncle Nelson's study at Kikwit. The governor was not present. Michael had asked permission through a secretary to consult the family's library on the South Pacific. He spent the afternoon reading, by his own letter to his sister, Anne, dated the 14th of March 1961, everything father has on the Dutch territory. What he read, almost certainly, included the cable file on the 1958 Otsjanep incident. In April 1958, 3 years before Michael would set foot on the same coastline, a Dutch colonial patrol officer named Max Lapre, accompanied by a small detachment of Dutch and indigenous soldiers, had entered the Asmat village of Otsjanep on the Outer River, on the southwestern coast of Dutch New Guinea. The patrol was investigating a reported intertribal raid. A standoff developed. Lapre opened fire. 4 Asmat men died. By Asmat custom, by the deep-time logic of a culture that had practiced reciprocal headhunting for at least 400 years, those 4 deaths were unsettled. They were a debt. The debt could only be paid in blood. The cable file at Kikwit recorded all of this. Michael, by his own letter, read it. He went anyway. In 10 months, Michael Rockefeller will be standing on the southwestern coast of Dutch New Guinea, 800 yards inland from the village of Otsjanep, holding 2 cigarette lighters and a steel hatchet. He will be alone. He will be unarmed. He will be standing in front of a man named Ajim, who is the brother of one of the 4 men killed by Max Lapre in April 1958. The blood debt will be 3 years and 7 months old. Michael Rockefeller will not know that he is, in that moment, the most expensive currency in human history. Michael Rockefeller arrives in Hollandia, the capital of Dutch New Guinea, on the 4th of April 1961. He is 22 years old. He has a Bolex 16mm camera, a Nagra tape recorder, $3,000 in traveller's checks, and a letter of introduction from his father to the Dutch resident commissioner. The Gardner expedition pushes inland to the Balium Valley in the Central Highlands. For the next 5 months, Michael lives among the Dani, a recently contacted highland people, whose technology is, by every objective measure, Stone Age. He records the sound of ritual warfare. He helps Gardner film the documentary that will eventually be released as Dead Birds in 1963. He learns to sleep on a wooden platform. He learns to eat sweet potato 3 times a day. He loses 31 pounds. In the letters he writes home, preserved at the Rockefeller Archive Center, partially published in his posthumous 1967 journal, he describes, for the first time in his recorded life, a state of mind he calls absolute alertness. He writes to his mother on the 8th of July 1961, "For the first time, no one here knows my name. They know me only by what I do today. I have never felt this clean." The expedition ends in September 1961. Robert Gardner returns to Cambridge. Most of the team flies home. Michael does not. He has discovered, in the months he spent in the Highlands, a culture he had never heard of before he arrived. A coastal people, 200 miles to the south, in the swamp delta where 4 major rivers empty into the Arafura Sea. They are woodcarvers of unparalleled skill. They are, by 1961, still actively practicing headhunting and ritual cannibalism. They are called the Asmat. He decides, on his own, with no expedition behind him, to spend the autumn collecting Asmat art for the Museum of Primitive Art in New York, which his father has founded. He flies south on the 4th of October, 1961. Between October 4 and the 17th of November 1961, Michael Rockefeller travels by motorized catamaran through the Asmat region, with a Dutch government anthropologist named René Wassing and 2 local guides, Leo and Simon, both teenage boys from a coastal Catholic mission. The catamaran is 40 feet long, 2 dugout canoes lashed to a wooden platform with a small inboard engine. He is collecting at a velocity no Western collector has ever attempted. He commissions and purchases, in approximately 6 weeks, more than 400 pieces bish poles up to 20 feet tall, war shields, ancestor figures, ceremonial drums, soul canoes. He pays in steel hatchets, fishing line, tobacco, and cigarette lighters. The Asmat have no currency. By the standards of their economy, Michael Rockefeller is the wealthiest visitor in their history. By the standards of his economy, he is making the greatest single private acquisition of tribal art in the 20th century. He visits Otsjanep on the 11th of November 1961. He spends 6 hours in the village. He commissions 4 bizju poles from a master carver named Pep. He hands out, by his own field notes, 14 hatchets, 22 lighters, and approximately 200 fish hooks. He photographs the men of the village standing in front of their longhouse. The photograph survives. There are 19 men in the frame. At least 7 of them are, by name, the brothers, sons, or nephews of the 4 men killed by Max Lapre in April 1958. Michael writes in his journal that evening entry of the 11th of November 1961, published 1967, p. 94. The men of Otsjanep are the strongest carvers I have yet met. There is a tension here I do not fully understand. I will return. He returns 6 days later. On the morning of the 17th of November 1961, the catamaran sets out from the Catholic mission at Agats with Michael, Wassing, Leo, and Simon. Their plan is to travel south and west along the coast, then into the mouth of the Islandan River to reach a village where Michael has commissioned a final set of carvings. Approximately 3 hours into the journey, in open water about 3 miles offshore, the inboard engine fails. The catamaran cannot be steered. The current, a strong westerly tide, combined with the outflow of the Islandan, begins carrying the boat away from land. By nightfall, they are 10 miles from shore. The 2 boys, Leo and Simon, conclude in the early morning of November 18 that the boat will sink. They strip, they dive into the water, they begin swimming for shore. They will reach land, by their own later testimony to Dutch authorities, after 14 hours in the water. Both survive. Michael and Wassing remain with the catamaran. By the morning of November 19, the catamaran has capsized. The 2 men are clinging to the overturned hull. They have drifted, by Wassing's later estimate, 22 miles offshore. Michael, at approximately 7:30 a.m. local time, makes a decision. He removes his trousers and shirt. He ties 2 empty red gasoline cans to his belt with a length of rope. He looks at Wassing. He says, "I think I can make it." He pushes off the hull. Wassing watches him swim, in a steady crawl, for approximately 20 minutes, until the swell rises and Wassing loses sight of him. That is the last time any verified Western witness sees Michael Rockefeller alive. Wassing is rescued 28 hours later, on the morning of November 20, by a Dutch search aircraft. He is dehydrated, sunburned, and lucid. He is able to give a coherent statement on the day of his rescue. He tells the Dutch authorities the direction Michael was swimming. He was swimming, in a straight line, toward the coast 8 miles to the north. He was swimming, in a straight line, toward Otsjanep. The first man on the planet to know that Michael Rockefeller was missing was a Dutch missionary radio operator at the Catholic mission station in Agats. He picked up a fragmentary distress signal at 4:14 a.m. on the 19th of November, 1961, approximately 3 hours before Michael entered the water. The signal was from the catamaran's emergency transmitter, activated by Wassing during the night. The message reached Hollandia, the colonial capital, by 6 a.m. It reached the Dutch governor's office by 7:30. It reached the U.S. consulate in Hollandia at 9:14 a.m. It reached Albany, New York, at 10:42 p.m. local time on November 18, 9 hours, before Michael would slide into the water. Governor Nelson Rockefeller was in his second-floor study at the executive mansion when the call came. He was alone. The aide on duty, William Ronan, later the chairman of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, recorded the moment in a private memorandum dated the 4th of December, 1961. The governor took the call standing up. He did not sit down. He listened for approximately 90 seconds. He said, "Get me the State Department. Get me a plane. Get me Mary." He hung up. He poured himself a glass of water. He said to me, in a low voice that was not directed at anyone in particular, "He is gone, Bill. He is gone." Nelson Rockefeller, the sitting governor of New York, the second most powerful elected official in the United States after the president, said the word gone, not missing, not in trouble, not, "We will find him at 10:44 p.m. on the evening of the 18th of November 1961. He said it before his son entered the water. What did Nelson Rockefeller know, on the night of the 18th of November 1961, that the rest of the world would not know until 2014? Within 48 hours of the call, Nelson had personally chartered a Boeing 707 from Pan American World Airways. He had personally ordered the transfer of 2 U.S. Air Force PBM Mariner search aircraft from the Philippines to Hollandia. He had personally telephoned, by State Department log, 3 Dutch cabinet ministers, 2 Dutch admirals, and the Indonesian foreign minister. The cost of the search operation he authorized, paid personally by the Rockefeller family, not by the state of New York, would exceed, by Hoffman's 2014 calculation, $1.2 million in 1961 dollars, roughly $12 million today. He flew to New Guinea with Michael's twin sister Mary on November 23. He arrived at Agats on November 24. He stayed 9 days. He left on December 3. He never returned. This is the fact every biographer of the Rockefeller family has struggled with for 63 years. Nelson Rockefeller, a man whose energy was, by every contemporary account, almost pathological, who micromanaged state contracts to the dollar, who once, in 1962, personally redesigned a highway interchange because he disliked the curve, gave up on his own son after 9 days. He went home. He resumed governing. He never spoke Michael's name in a public speech again. The official Dutch search lasted 10 days. It involved 2 American search planes, 3 Dutch aircraft, 4 Australian aircraft, 2 destroyers, the USS Hopewell and the Dutch Miss Everston, 15 smaller vessels, and approximately 1,000 Asmat men in canoes, coordinated through the Catholic missions at Agats and Pirimapun. It found the catamaran. It found, on the beach near Otsjanep, a single empty red gasoline can. It did not find Michael Rockefeller. It did not find a body. It did not find clothing. It did not find the second gasoline can. It did not find the rope. On the 1st of December, 1961, Nelson Rockefeller stood on the deck of the USS Hopewell and read a prepared statement to a small group of Australian and Dutch reporters. The statement is preserved in the Reuters Wire archive of that date. It reads, in full, "My son is presumed lost at sea. We accept the conclusion of the Netherlands authorities. We are deeply grateful to all who have searched. We will not be making further comment." He flew home 2 days later. The Dutch resident commissioner in Hollandia, F.R.J. Verhoeven, had wanted to question the men of Otsjanep formally. He had reason to. He had received, by his own classified cable to The Hague, dated the 28th of November, 1961, what he described as credible local reports. Nelson Rockefeller, by Verhoeven's own report, personally requested he stand down. Verhoeven did. But the Asmat themselves did not stand down. They had a memory longer than the colonial administration. They had a debt to pay, and they had, by the morning of the 19th of November 1961, paid it. In 9 years, a Dutch missionary named Father Hubertus von Page will walk into a longhouse in the village of Otsjanep on a routine pastoral visit, and noticed three things: a particular pair of round, wire-rimmed eyeglasses hanging from a ceremonial drum, a steel hatchet of a make not manufactured in New Guinea, and a single small fragment of bone that should not have been in that longhouse. Father von Page will say nothing. He will leave Otsjanep. He will write a letter to his bishop. The letter will be carried by hand to the diocese in Hollandia. From there, it will be carried also by hand, at the bishop's instruction, to a sealed file in the Vatican. It will not be opened until 2012. To understand what almost certainly happened on the beach near Otsjanep on the morning of the 19th of November, 1961, you have to understand how the Asmat had organized their universe for the 400 years before a Western foot ever touched their coast. The Asmat lived in approximately 110 villages, scattered across 20,000 square kilometers of mangrove, swamp, tidal river, and sago palm forest. They had no agriculture in the conventional sense. They harvested sago, a starch extracted from the trunk of a palm, and they fished. They built longhouses called Jew that ran 200 feet long and held entire male lineages. They produced, in the medium of carved ironwood, what most 20th century art historians regard as the most sophisticated wood sculpture in the Pacific. And they practiced, as a religious obligation, reciprocal headhunting. The logic was not random violence, it was bookkeeping. Every death in an Asmat village, every illness, every drowning, every spear wound created a spiritual debt. The deceased's soul could not pass into the ancestor world until the debt was repaid by the killing of an enemy, the consumption of his flesh, and the ritual incorporation of his head into the visage pole carved in his memory. The cycle was continuous. Every village was, at any given moment, in debt to roughly 4 other villages and owed obligations from roughly 4 others. The system had been stable for centuries. In April 1958, the Dutch colonial patrol officer Max Lapre shot 4 men dead at the Otsjanep Longhouse during a confrontation that, by his own report, had begun as an investigation of an intertribal raid. The 4 men were named Osum, Akon, Faratsjam, and Samut. They were senior members of the village. By Asmat religious law, their deaths created a debt of 4 heads. The debt was not against the Dutch who, in Asmat cosmology, were not human in the same category as Asmat enemies. The debt was against the next white men who entered the village's geographic field. The debt was open. It would remain open for 3 years and 7 months. There is a specific element of Asmat ritual practice that becomes critical to what happens next. When an Asmat war party killed a debt payer, the body was not consumed indiscriminately. The skull was kept for the bisque pole. The thigh bones were carved into ceremonial daggers. The brain was eaten by senior warriors in a specific order. And the eyes were considered the seat of the victim's spirit. The eyes were eaten raw, immediately, on the beach where the killing took place. This practice was extensively documented by Dutch missionaries, Catholic anthropologists, and the Harvard Peabody expedition that worked the region from 1959 onward. It was not theoretical. It was happening on the southwestern coast of Dutch New Guinea during the precise months Michael Rockefeller was traveling there. He almost certainly knew this. Robert Gardner, who had supervised him in the Baliem Valley earlier that year, had personally briefed him on coastal Asmat practices before he flew south. Gardner's papers held at the Harvard Film Study Center contain a single typed page, dated the 22nd of September 1961, that lists in Gardner's handwriting the Asmat villages Michael was advised to enter only with a Dutch officer or government agent. Otsjanep is on the list. It is underlined twice. Michael went to Otsjanep on the 11th of November 1961, alone except for Wassing. The Dutch officer scheduled to accompany them did not appear. Michael entered the village anyway. What happens between approximately 11:30 a.m. and 1 p.m.? On the 19th of November, 1961, at the mouth of the Euta River, near the village of Otsjanep, is reconstructed today from 4 overlapping evidentiary streams. First, the rescued boatmate Renee Wassing's statement of the 21st of November 1961 regarding direction and time of swim. Second, the 1962 internal report of the Dutch government investigator Wim van der Waal, declassified at the Nationaal Archief in The Hague in 2012. Third, the 1968 confession letter written by Father Hubertus von Page to his bishop, finally released to journalist Karl Hoffmann in 2012. Fourth, the 2012 first-hand interviews Hoffmann himself conducted in the Longhouse of Otsjanep, with 3 elderly men who as young warriors had been physically present. The reconstruction is the following. Michael Rockefeller, swimming with 2 empty gasoline cans tied to his belt, reached shoreline somewhere between the mouth of the Outer and the beach at Otsjanep at approximately 11:30 am. Local time. He had been in the water for approximately 4 hours. He was exhausted. He was sunburned across his back and shoulders. He had swallowed, over the course of the swim, a significant quantity of seawater. He was alive. He walked, by the testimony of the Otsjanep men interviewed by Hoffmann 51 years later, north along the beach, looking weak. A fishing party from Otsjanep, 5 men in 2 canoes, returning with the morning's catch, saw him from approximately 300 yards offshore. They turned their canoes. They came in. The men recognized him. He was, by their own testimony to Hoffmann, the white man who had given the hatchets 8 days before. The lead man of the canoes was named Pep. Yes, the same Pep who had carved the bisgee poles Michael had commissioned on November 11. Pep's brother had been one of the 4 men shot dead by Max Lapre in April 1958. The decision to kill, in Asmat society, was not a single decision. It was a recognition. Pep recognized, in the man walking up the beach, the ledger entry that closed an open debt. He turned to the 4 other men in the canoes. He said one word, recorded in the 2012 interview transcripts, Ibanam. It means, approximately, it is time. The 5 men landed their canoes. Michael saw them. He raised one hand. He may have spoken Pep's grandson in the 2012 interview, says Michael said, Lemonat, the Asmat word for friend. Michael had learned approximately 50 Asmat words in the previous 6 weeks. Pep, by the same testimony, did not respond. The killing blow was struck by a man named Finn with a stone-headed war spear between the 3rd and 4th ribs on the left side, approximately 12 seconds after the canoes landed. Michael fell. He was carried, by the 5 men, approximately 400 yards inland, to a clearing the Asmat called the Yao, the place of ritual. He was alive when he arrived in the clearing. He was not alive when he left it. The 2 empty red gasoline cans, tied with rope, bobbing on the surface of a brown sea. You have been holding that image for 20 minutes. The Dutch search planes found one of them, on the beach near Otsjanep, on the 24th of November 1961. The second can has never been recovered. The most likely location, by the Hoffmann reconstruction, is the bed of the Outer River, where it was washed off Michael's belt by the warriors before they carried his body inland. What happened in the Yao clearing 400 yards inland from the beach at Otsjanep between approximately 1 p. and sunset on the 19th of November, 1961, is documented by 3 independent streams of testimony, the 1968 von Page letter, the 1969 Macklin investigation, and the 2012 Hoffmann interviews that converge, in their essential particulars, with disturbing precision. The body was prepared according to Asmat ritual law, as it had been practiced for at least 400 years. The skull was separated from the body with a stone adze. The brain was extracted through the foramen magnum and divided among the senior warriors of the Longhouse, 5 men, by the 2012 testimony, including Pep, Finn, and a 3rd man named Ajim. The thigh bones were cleaned and set aside for the carving of ceremonial daggers. The skin was removed in a single piece from the upper torso and dried over a small fire for use in a jipe mask, the spirit costume worn at the next major ceremonial cycle. The remaining flesh was distributed, in carefully measured portions, among the adult men of the village. The eyes were eaten raw, on the beach, by the man who had struck the killing blow. By the 2012 testimony of Pep's grandson, passed down through 3 generations of oral history, that man was Finn. The skull was kept. It was, by Asmat custom, a debt-closing object. It had to be physically present in the longhouse for the ancestor cycle of Osum, Akon, Faratsjam, and Samut to be completed. By the 1968 von Page letter, 3 skulls were still in the longhouse at Otsjanep when he visited in November of that year. He recognized one of them, the one with the slightly undersized mandible and the unusual frontal bone structure of a Northern European male in his early 20s, and he understood, immediately, what he was looking at. The 4th skull, the one belonging to Michael Rockefeller, was by Asmat custom buried in the floor of the longhouse beneath the carving station of the Bizj pole that closed the 1958 debt. That pole was carved over the winter of 1961-62. It was sold, in March 1962, by a coastal trader named Schneebaum to a Catholic mission in Pirimapun. It was acquired, in 1965, by the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. It is on public display there today. It is one of the Bizj poles Michael Rockefeller commissioned. The Dutch government investigator Wim van der Waal arrived in Otsjanep on the 28th of December, 1961, 5 weeks after Michael's disappearance, and 3 weeks after Nelson Rockefeller had personally requested the formal investigation be wound down. Van der Waal was a 38-year-old colonial officer, fluent in Bahasa, Indonesia, 3 Asmat dialects, and Dutch. He had worked the southwestern coast for 9 years. He knew the village. He knew the men. He stayed for 11 days. His final report, dated the 22nd of January 1962, ran to 47 typed pages. It was classified at the highest level of the Dutch colonial service. It was hand-delivered to The Hague by diplomatic courier. It was cross-filed at the U.S. State Department on the 4th of February 1962. A single copy was forwarded, on the 8th of February 1962, to the personal office of Governor Nelson Rockefeller in Albany. The report concluded in language that was unambiguous in the original Dutch that Michael Clark Rockefeller had been killed and ritually consumed by a Otsjanep war party of approximately 5 men on the morning of the 19th of November, 1961, in retaliation for the La Prée incident of April 1958. It named 4 of the 5 men. It did not recommend prosecution. By 1962, Dutch New Guinea was 8 months from being formally transferred to United Nations administration and 17 months from being absorbed into Indonesia under the Bunker Plan. The Dutch colonial service had no remaining political capacity to prosecute an Asmat ritual killing, particularly one whose victim was the son of a sitting American governor, whose family had personally requested silence. The report was buried. It was declassified by the Nationaal Archief in The Hague on a routine 50-year cycle in 2012. Carl Hoffman obtained the file in 2013. He published the bulk of its contents in Savage Harvest in 2014. What did Nelson Rockefeller know, on the night of the 18th of November 1961, that the rest of the world would not know until 2014? By Hoffman's reconstruction, supported by the State Department logs, the Pan Am Charter records, and the Ronan Memorandum, Nelson Rockefeller had been personally briefed by the U.S. consul in Hollandia on the evening of November 18 on 3 specific items. First, the location of the catamaran's last known position relative to Otsjanep. Second, the unresolved status of the 1958 La Prée incident, which was a known item in the Hollandia consular file. Third, the prevailing opinion of the resident Catholic missionaries communicated through the consul that no Western man swimming alone toward that stretch of coastline could expect to survive contact with the local population. Nelson Rockefeller, governor of New York, said the word "gone" before his son entered the water because he had already done the arithmetic. He knew his son was a debt payer. He knew he could not say so publicly, without ending the political career of every Rockefeller of his generation. He chose silence. In the immediate weeks after the 3rd of December 1961, the Rockefeller family executed one of the most disciplined silences in the history of American public life. Nelson did not speak Michael's name in a public address again for the remainder of his 15 years as governor. Mary Rockefeller, Michael's mother, refused all interview requests until her death in 1999. Michael's twin sister, Mary, who had flown to New Guinea with her father, gave one short interview to The New Yorker in 1,971 inches, which she said only, "I have nothing to add. He went into the water. He did not come out." The family-funded Museum of Primitive Art in New York, which Michael had been collecting for, was quietly absorbed into the Metropolitan Museum of Art in 1969. The Asmat collection, including the 4 Bisgee poles from Otsjanep, became the founding nucleus of the Met's Michael C. Rockefeller Wing, opened on the 14th of May, 1982. The wing is named after him. It contains the carvings he commissioned in the final 8 days of his life. It does not contain his name. The plaque at the entrance reads only, "In memory of Michael C. Rockefeller, lost in New Guinea, 1961. The word "lost" is doing a great deal of work. After the 3rd of December, 1961, Nelson Rockefeller becomes a different governor. The contemporary biographers, Joseph Persico, Carrie Reich, Richard Norton Smith, all note the change, though none of them connected explicitly to Michael's disappearance. Nelson's working hours expand. His staff turnover doubles. He begins, in February 1962, the construction project that will dominate the rest of his governorship, the Empire State Plaza in Albany. 10 buildings, 98 acres, $1.7 billion in 1960s, money equivalent to roughly $17 billion today. The largest single state capital construction project in American history. He is, by every account, building a monument. He is also, by the consistent assessment of every aide who served him after 1961, running away from something. Mary Rockefeller, his wife of 31 years, files for divorce on the 17th of March 1962. The divorce is finalized on the 16th of March 1963. She does not give a public reason. In her unpublished diaries, accessed by Carrie Reich for his 1996 biography, she writes a single line dated the 19th of November, 1962, the first anniversary of the disappearance. "Nelson cannot look at me. I cannot look at him. There is a third person in this house who is not here." Nelson remarries on the 4th of May, 1963. The new wife is Margaretta Happy Murphy, the 36-year-old wife of one of his medical advisors. The remarriage is so politically catastrophic that it cost Nelson the 1,964 Republican presidential nomination which, until that May, he had been favored to win. He runs for governor again in 1966. He wins. He runs again in 1970. He wins. He resigns in 1973. He becomes Vice President of the United States on the 19th of December, 1974, under Gerald Ford. He serves 26 months. He is dropped from the 1,976 Republican ticket. He retires from public life on the 20th of January, 1977. He dies on the 26th of January, 1979, at the age of 70. The official cause of death is a heart attack at his Manhattan townhouse. The actual circumstances: he was found in the company of a 25-year-old former staff aide named Megan Marshak, who had not phoned an ambulance for at least an hour after the attack began, are reported by the New York Times over a 6-week investigation in February and March 1979. He never spoke Michael's name in public again. The Rockefeller family's silence held, externally, for 53 years. Internally, it began to fracture much earlier. The first independent investigation was conducted by the journalist Milt Macklin between 1968 and 1969. Macklin spent 11 months in the Asmat. He interviewed 23 direct or second-hand witnesses. He published The Search for Michael Rockefeller in 1972. He concluded, based on the convergence of testimony, that Michael had reached shore alive, had been killed by a war party from Otstjanep, and had been ritually consumed in retaliation for the 1958 incident. The book was reviewed politely. It was widely read. It changed nothing publicly. The second investigation was conducted by Father Hubertus von Page, the Dutch missionary, who had walked into the Otstjanep longhouse in November 1968 and recognized the eyeglasses, the hatchet, and the bone fragment. Von Page had written immediately to his bishop. The letter had been forwarded, by Vatican protocol, to a sealed file at the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples. It would not be released until 2012, after Von Page, by then a retired priest living in the Netherlands, petitioned for its declassification on humanitarian grounds. The letter, when finally released, contained the names of 3 Otstjanep men, one of whom matched a name in the 1962 Van der Waal report. The third investigation was conducted by the American journalist Carl Hoffman between 2012 and 2014. Hoffman lived in Agats for 2 months. He traveled by canoe to Otstjanep. He sat in the longhouse where Michael had been killed. He interviewed, with a missionary translator, 4 men whose fathers, uncles, or grandfathers had been physically present at the killing. The eldest of his interviewees, a man identified only as Kokai, approximately 78 years old in 2012, had personally been a young warrior in the canoes that landed Michael on the Endero beach. The Azmat ritual practice. The eyes eaten raw on the beach by the man who struck the killing blow. Hoffman, in his 2012 Longhouse interview with Kokai, asked the question directly. He asked who had eaten Michael Rockefeller's eyes. Kokai answered without hesitation. He named Finn. He said Finn had died in 1989, of natural causes. He said Finn had told the story to his sons before he died, and his sons had told it to their sons, and the story had become in Otstjanep what Hoffman called an open secret with no audience outside the longhouse. The single sentence Hoffman extracted from Kokai, the sentence the cold open promised you in minute 1, preserved verbatim in Savage Harvest, p. 244, is this. He came up the beach with his eyes already half closed. We did not have to chase him. He came to us. After Savage Harvest was published in March 2014, the Rockefeller family was contacted by every major American news outlet for comment. The family, represented by Michael's twin sister Mary, by then 75 years old, released a single statement through Family Office spokesperson Fraser Seitel on the 18th of March 2014. The family appreciates the work of Mr. Hoffman. We have nothing to add to the conclusion reached by the authorities in 1962. Michael was lost at sea. We continue to honor his memory through the collection at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. 2 sentences acknowledging Hoffman, 2 sentences denying him. The denial was on the question of fact. The acknowledgement was on the question of decency. Mary Rockefeller, Michael's twin, never publicly elaborated. She has, by the recent reporting of the Wall Street Journal in March 2024, given private permission to the Metropolitan Museum to update the wall text in the Michael C. Rockefeller wing. As of this writing, that update has not been made. What is the difference between lost and consumed? It is the difference, on the wall plaque of the Met, between the most important Rockefeller artifact in public hands and what that artifact actually is. The 4 Bisjay poles standing in the entrance gallery of the Michael C. Rockefeller wing are, by every credible reconstruction, the Bisjay poles that closed the spiritual debt against Michael Rockefeller's body. They are not memorials to him. They are objects containing him at minimum in the metaphorical, ancestral sense the Azmat themselves intended. Very probably, in the case of one of them, in a more literal sense as well. The wing is the world's most visited collection of Azmat art. It receives, by Met figures, approximately 7 million visitors per year. It is, by any reasonable measure, also the world's most visited Rockefeller funerary monument. Almost no one who walks through it knows. Michael Rockefeller was 23 years old. He had no children. He had inherited approximately $25 million at 21 and had, in the 2 years before his death, drawn on perhaps 3% of it for living expenses and collecting. The trust reverted, on his death, to the broader Rockefeller family settlement. The line did not end with him. There are over 200 descendants of John D. Rockefeller Sr. alive today. But the idea of a Rockefeller venturing alone, without security, beyond the reach of the family name, that idea ended on a beach near Otstjanep on the morning of the 19th of November, 1961. It has not been attempted since. 4 generations. 1 man builds, 2 men preserve, 1 son disappears. This is the variant of the dynasty pattern that almost no scholar of American wealth has properly named. The Rockefellers did not collapse the way the Vanderbilts collapsed, or the way the Dukes collapsed, or the way the Hartfords collapsed. They did not run out of money, they did not run out of names, they did not run out of children. They lost, instead, the capacity to risk, and they lost it in a single afternoon on a beach 8,000 miles from home. By 1961, the Rockefeller family had spent 91 years optimizing for one variable: control. John D. Sr. controlled the production of oil. John D. Jr. controlled the deployment of philanthropy. Nelson controlled the state of New York. David controlled the second largest bank in America. The instinct that had built the empire, the instinct to walk into Hewitt and Tuttle as a 16-year-old with no diploma and ask for a job, had been engineered out of the family by 3 generations of relentless containment. Michael was the first Rockefeller in 3 generations who tried to step outside the controlled environment. He was the first who tried to do something his name had not been attached to. He was the first who walked, deliberately, into a place where the Rockefeller fortune was a meaningless concept. He died in fewer than 240 days. His death was not, by the cold calculus of cultural collision, a tragedy. It was a transaction. The Asmat had a debt of 4 heads. They were paid 1 head. The arithmetic by their bookkeeping balanced. The arithmetic that did not balance was Nelson's. His son had been collateral on a loan Nelson had not known the family had taken out. The loan had been issued in 1958 by Max Lapre. The loan came due on the 19th of November, 1961. And Nelson, who controlled almost everything, discovered on a phone call in his Albany study that he had not and could never control the schedule on which the universe demanded payment. What does the disappearance of Michael Rockefeller ultimately mean? It means that no fortune, however large, purchases exemption from systems older than itself. The Asmat had been balancing their books for at least 400 years before John D. Rockefeller refined his first barrel of oil. Their ledger was older than Standard Oil, older than the United States, older than the printing press. When a young man with 2 empty gasoline cans tied to his belt walked up a beach on the Uta River, he walked into a system of accounting that had no entry for Rockefeller. He was, in that ledger, simply the next white man. It means that the second great American myth, the myth that wealth secures the children of the wealthy, is the inverse of the truth. Michael Rockefeller died because his name was Rockefeller. If he had been the son of a Cleveland dentist, he would not have had the trust fund to charter the catamaran. He would not have had the Harvard credentials to lead the collecting trip. He would not have had the cultural permission to walk, alone, into a culture that the Dutch government had repeatedly classified as inaccessible. The fortune did not protect him, it delivered him. And it means, perhaps most importantly, that silence is the most expensive luxury wealth can purchase. Nelson Rockefeller bought, with his 9-day search and his statement on the deck of the USS Hopewell, 53 years of public uncertainty about what had happened to his son. The silence cost his marriage. It cost him the 1,964 Republican nomination. It cost him, by every available account, the remaining 17 years of his life which he spent governing, building, remarrying, and not, ever, looking again toward the southwestern coast of New Guinea. The fortune is still here, the wing at the Met is still here, the bisque poles are still here. The young man is not. The line is not closed, but it is, in its essential ambition, ended. Walk into the Metropolitan Museum of Art in Manhattan today. Cross the Great Hall, turn left at the Egyptian wing, past the Temple of Dendur, continue through the European sculpture galleries. At the southern end of the museum, on the ground floor, you will find an entrance flanked by glass. The entrance reads, the Michael C. Rockefeller Wing. You will walk into a long, low gallery built specifically to house Pacific, African, and pre-Columbian art. The lighting is warm, the ceilings are high. The room is, by deliberate design, the quietest gallery in the museum. Approximately 60 feet from the entrance, in a vitrine that runs the full height of the wall, stand 4 wooden poles. They are carved from a single trunk of ironwood each. They are between 15 and 20 feet tall. They are painted in red ochre, white lime, and charcoal black. The forms at the top are interlocking human figures, ancestor faces, and protruding phallic spurs. They are unlike any other object in the museum. The plaque identifies them as Bij Poles, Otsjanep Village, Asmat Region, southern coast of West Papua, c. 1959, 1962. There is no further explanation. The 4th pole, the rightmost one, by the standard installation, was carved over the winter of 1961 and 1962. It was carved by a man named Pep. It was carved to close a debt of 4 heads. The 4th and final head represented in that pole is, by every credible reconstruction in this script, the head of Michael Clark Rockefeller. The pole stands 17 feet tall. It is the tallest funerary marker in American public space whose subject does not appear in the written label. You can stand in front of it, you can look up. The lighting from above casts the carved face into shadow. The face is screaming. That, in the most literal possible sense, is what is left. So we return, one final time, to the question we asked in the cold open. How does the wealthiest young man in America vanish without a body, without a witness, and without a single confirmed trace? The answer is that he did not vanish. He was resolved by a system of religious bookkeeping in a clearing 400 yards inland from a beach on the Outer River, on the afternoon of the 19th of November, 1961. The vanishing was a Western perceptual problem. It was a problem of narrative, not of fact. The fact had a witness. The fact had a witness in every adult man of Otsjanep village. Their witnesses simply did not file reports with the Dutch colonial service. They had no obligation to. The killing was, by their law, lawful. What vanished was not Michael Rockefeller. What vanished was the American family's belief that there were no places on earth their fortune could not reach. The fortune could not reach Otsjanep on the 19th of November, 1961. It still cannot reach it today. The men of Otsjanep are alive. The grandsons of Pep, of Finn, of Ajim are alive. They live in the same longhouses. They carve the same poles. They tell among themselves the same story. In part 2, Michael spent a single afternoon in his Uncle Nelson's study at Kaikwit, reading the family's South Pacific cable file. He almost certainly read the 1958 Otsjanep cable. He understood, on some level the historical record cannot precisely reconstruct, that there was an open debt on the southwestern coast of Dutch New Guinea. He went anyway. Why? The answer, by every reading of his journals and his letters, is the answer that defines his entire too short life. Michael Rockefeller wanted, more than he wanted safety, to know whether his name would be the thing that got him through. He wanted, in the deepest part of his 23-year-old psychology, to discover whether he was a Rockefeller because of who he was or because of what was done to him. The Asmat answered the question. The answer was the second. The Standard Oil fortune at the founder's death was approximately $1.5 billion. Across all Rockefeller-derived holdings, The family's collective wealth today exceeds 11 billion. Michael Clark, Rockefeller's body has never been found. His skull, by the most credible reconstruction, is buried in the floor of a longhouse on the Utah River. The line is not closed. It is open,